The first thing I had to do was block out the people who weren't supporting me, which was 99.999% of the world.
So the same stats as you surviving your second cancer.
Yeah, I had to block out the noise. And even today we have the noise comes in so many different forms and fashions and functions, and the biggest one is social media. And I remember I was having a bad day. I was flipping through social media and I realized all of a sudden I was comparing myself at my worst to somebody else's best. I'm like, what am I doing? So first, block out the noise, get rid of it, and then focus on why I was doing it. A lot of people have goals and dreams, and everybody should. But if your goal is to buy a $2 million home, and a 50-foot yacht, well, why? What's the reason behind it?
I am here with our next conversation in the Speaker Driven Business Podcast, and I am so excited to be having a great conversation. I'm preempting great conversation with the fabulous Sean Swarner. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate that. I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the conversation for a whole raft of reasons, which our audience will get to hear about in just one moment. But let's start with this, because our audience is all over the world. Where in the world are you right now, and how has that place shaped or influenced you?
That is a great question. And I travel so much. I was literally on a plane 2 days ago, and I looked at the guy who sat on the plane next to me. He's like, "Are you from Chicago?" He looks at me with a really strange look on his face. It's like, "Why would you ask me that?" I'm like, "Well, because you just boarded." He's like, "We're in Dallas." So, oh my God. Noise canceling headphones in. Good night. Right now, I know where I am because I am at home in Colorado, and
Amazing.
it's beautiful, beautiful outside. It's snowing right now, and it has affected my life in such a way that if it wasn't for Colorado, I wouldn't have climbed Mount Everest and done all the things I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Wow. Okay. So I'm looking forward to unpacking that. It's incredible how some places really hold a place in our heart because of what they bring to our world and how they enrich it. Sean, you have an incredible story and world that we're going to unpack during this, but let's start with the Sean Swarner version. Let's give the 5-7 minute version of who Sean Swarner is and how he got to be where he is at the moment. So kind of the run through, if you like.
Great. And I'm assuming you probably don't want to go back far enough, 9 months before my birth when my mom and dad got together. So
no, we don't need to start there. We don't, unless there's a crazy story with your parents, but we don't need to start there.
So the short version is I grew up in a very small town, a farming community in Midwest Ohio. And if people aren't familiar with that, Michigan's the one that looks like a glove. Ohio is the one that looks like that down below it. So people always go, "I'm from here." I am from here. So
from the middle of everything.
Yeah, right there, right by my nail. Normal kid. I was just trying to figure out ways to not get caught while doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And
awesome.
Like all of us, at some point, it's amazing we're still alive. So I was completely normal until a knee injury from sports stuck me in the hospital. And because it was a small town, small hospital, they thought I had pneumonia. And you can't cure cancer by sucking on a nebulizer. So I wasn't getting any better. But I loved the attention. I was in the 8th grade, 13 years old, and the cheerleaders were coming in, bringing balloons. Like, hey, this is fantastic. My friends I was missing school. It's amazing. And then the teachers brought in the homework. I was like, wait a minute. So eventually diagnosed me, took me to a larger hospital with advanced stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And
wow.
It's not all sadness because, like I said earlier about climbing Mount Everest. So we'll get to that. It's kind of like I just ruined the Titanic. You know what's going to happen in the movie?
It's all right. We'll take you beyond the Titanic, people. It's all okay.
So, advanced stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they told my parents that I had 3 months to live as a 13 and 14-year-old. But the good thing, I think, is when telling me about the diagnosis, my parents never mentioned the word cancer. They said, Sean,
Wow.
you're sick. Sean, you're going to get better. And we're going to do everything we possibly can to get you back to being normal. So because I was young enough and I implicitly trusted my parents and what they told me, I believed it to be true. So I was no longer, well, I wasn't fighting for my life. I was just sick.
I
So
love
that
that.
mindset was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I also remember, waking up one morning, my hair was falling out in chunks. It was clogging the drain in the water. The water was rising up in the shower. But it's amazing how if you look back at it, I have turned that tragedy into my triumph, that setback into my superpower. So
Mm.
I was in remission for about a year, going in for a checkup. For the first cancer, they found another one, which was completely unrelated. Diagnosed me with a type of cancer that affects 3 out of 1 million people, and the chances of me surviving both was essentially 0.00000000001, 9 zeros and a 1%.
Yeah.
Not happening. But again, because of that mindset, I wasn't focused on the 99.9999999% death rate. I was focused on that 0.00001% success rate. I was like, so you're
Yeah.
telling me there's a chance?
I
Like,
love
let's
that.
do it.
Pure
They gave me
optimism.
Absolutely. They gave me 14 days to live. I was in a medically induced coma for a year of my life, and I lost the function of my right lung. So I only have one lung. Now, going back to what we mentioned earlier,
So
climbing
just
Everest,
sorry, one moment. Just you're in medically induced coma for a year. What age were you then?
16, almost 17 years old. So I had cancer
Okay.
from basically, let's just say my teen years before I
Teenage
went off
years.
to
Yeah.
college, before I went to university. Yeah. So let's all take a trip back without dating ourselves to, the late 80s, early 90s. When you were in school, your
Yeah.
biggest concerns and fears were where you were going to sit at lunchtime, maybe
Mm.
be popular, maybe not getting picked on.
Mm-hmm.
I was literally night after night after night terrified to close my eyes because I didn't know if they were going to open the next morning.
Yeah. How do you assimilate that as a teenager? Or is it just you lent into the trust and the faith of your parents?
Yes, that, but also when you're in a situation, looking at it from the outside, you always wonder, how did that person do that? They
Yeah.
must be incredibly strong. But in all honesty, I tell people, you may not be able to control what happens to you, but you control how you react to it.
Mm.
And in situations like this, you're almost forced to react. I could either fight for my life or give up and die. So I think at such a young age, I didn't focus on not dying. I focused on living.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in a situation like that, you're almost forced to choose where your background comes from. Those help you make the decisions. So I was a competitive swimmer for years and years and years and years. In fact, I probably have swimming records from when I was young, 13, 14 years old, 12, 13 years old, that beat Ian Thorpe. I know he's a big name
Okay.
down there.
Yeah, he
You're
is. He
probably
is.
but after they cut into my lat muscle over here, now I just swim in circles. So there's nothing like it.
Like a one arm
Yeah,
dolphin
exactly.
almost. Yeah, okay.
But having the background in swimming and that competitive edge
Mm.
taught me how to deal with setbacks.
Mm.
So every morning, I wasn't focused on being the best. I was focused on being my best. And how could I be better today than I was yesterday?
Yeah.
And I got that from my parents and my upbringing.
Mm. So coming out of that medically induced coma, you lose your right lung. What comes next?
Well, I went to university, went to college. I turned into an absolute party animal. I started off, well, I
Lease on
started off,
life,
yeah,
university. What else are you gonna do?
well, I started off molecular biology. I thankfully am a lot smarter than I look, and I took organic chemistry and immunology. And because I was a crazy party animal, it didn't take me long to realize that if you don't open a book, you're probably not going to pass organic chemistry.
No,
So
not at all.
I
We can wish a lot of things into being, but that's probably not one of them.
that's just not going to happen. So
Yeah.
I switched to psychology because I was fascinated with the mind. And I wanted to be
Yeah.
a psychologist for cancer patients because, as we all know, it's not an individual journey. You're just like going through
Mm.
life. Any trauma, anything that you have in your life, if you have a support group there, if you have your support team, it makes things so much easier.
Yeah.
So I went through the cancers by myself, with my mom, with my dad, with the family, with everybody. So it was all of us
Mm.
together. And while I was studying to be a psychologist for cancer patients, I also realized I couldn't help others until I helped myself first.
Love that.
And that goes for anything.
Yeah. Can we also shout that out a little louder for all the psychologists that should do the same thing? Sorry, that's a little bit of a, but
Yeah.
literally, I love that that's actually a foundational realization that you had.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I've helped a lot of people with this realization. One of them was my best friend, where I kept telling him, if you keep giving and giving and giving and giving, you're going to have nothing left. So if you
Mm.
don't take care of yourself first, you're doing those you're trying to take care of an injustice because you can't take care of them as much as you should be able to.
Yeah. 100%.
So you have to take care of yourself first. It goes back to the analogy of when a plane, as I travel so much, knock on wood, if a plane uses pressure, the oxygen masks deploy, put it on yourself before helping somebody else. You do
Absolutely.
that because if you don't have oxygen, you physiologically cannot help someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we all get it. You can't pour from an empty cup.
That's actually a really good metaphor just for you, full stop, because the oxygen is obviously one of the things that you've had to really fight for to maintain. So when it comes to oxygen for yourself, you had this realization. Where did you take your career from that point?
Well, I took a sabbatical from my
Yeah.
studies, and this is the world's longest sabbatical. So
You're still on it? Is that what you're saying?
I'm still on my sabbatical.
I love that.
And I came up with something else because, like I said, I didn't think I could handle working with other people who've been touched by cancer if I couldn't handle dealing with myself first.
Yeah.
But I realized that I had been blessed with the mind-body connection to do amazing things. One of them was a year after my last treatment, I won my high school's league track meet in the 800-meter run. It was
Impressive.
out of nowhere. Thank you. It was out of nowhere. Everyone was like, who's this guy? Where'd he come from? Because I wasn't around the year before.
Yeah.
So I decided that I wanted to give back to the cancer community and give people something I never had, which is unfortunately hope. Without hope, the human body can't survive.
Yeah.
And that's when I did some research and found that no cancer survivor had ever climbed Mount Everest before. And I thought, well, what better, bigger platform than the highest place on Earth?
So where did that seed, though? Because you said, I did some research and discovered. Where did the idea come from, though? Where did that crazy moment of, I wonder if anyone who survived cancer has ever climbed Mount Everest, where did that come from?
It depends on who you ask.
This is sounding a bit like family folklore right now.
So one of my college friends loaned me a book about Everest. He claims credit, saying it was his seed that was planted in my brain. Like, I gave you the reason to do it. Another one is my brother and I were climbing in Jacksonville, Florida, which is the weird looking shape at the end of the United States. And some people were talking about that, but I wanted to do something big. My initial thought was to run across the United States and visit local hospitals along the way and share my survivorship story with the patients and just collect these stories of other survivors. Because, like I said, it's not an individual journey. But I kept thinking bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I know it's going to sound really weird when I say this, but logically, I came up with Mount Everest.
Logically? Well, I guess it's the highest mountain that you can summit. So if you're looking for bigger and bigger, I guess the logical steps took you straight up the side of that mountain. Is that what you're telling me?
That's exactly it. It's much bigger than Kosciuszko in Australia.
Australia,
So I kept thinking bigger and bigger and bigger.
Amazing. And so then when you had that realization, what was it you had to do to get ready for that? Because I'm assuming it wasn't a normal, summer tears preparation.
Correct, especially because I was living in the United States' biggest sandbar, Florida. And
Complete opposite.
right. Well, the highest point in Florida is actually the top of the Four Seasons Hotel in Miami.
We have places in Australia where they say you're a little bit too close to sea level, but now I understand in that one sentence, I understand a lot more about the topography of Florida. Yeah, you might need a little higher than that to get ready for Everest.
Yeah, I couldn't go up and down the stairwell 100 times to train, so I moved to Colorado. I packed up at the time my entire life savings into a Honda Civic.
Wow.
Drove out to Colorado, and yeah, it was like the back seat was packed, the trunk was packed, my brother was in the driver's seat. We took our time driving across the country, had a wonderful trip, and we ended up in Colorado. We planned it so we would end up in Colorado, and we went to the Rocky Mountains where I literally started training. And I realized that if I wanted to do something that no one has ever done before, I had to train like no one's ever trained before. Especially because I was attempting to climb the highest mountain in the world with one lung.
Yeah.
People told me it's not possible.
So when you talk about I had to train like no one had ever trained before, what did you draw on and who did you reference? Like, where did you get how to train for that? Because there wouldn't have been a playbook.
Right. Well, it's also, I don't have children, but I'm assuming it's a lot like raising children. They don't have a handbook. There's no manual for kids.
No, there isn't. I've raised 4 of them. Definitely no manual.
So it's kind of trial and error. Hopefully more trial than error because you don't want to screw up your kids.
Yeah.
Hopefully
you don't want to screw up the remaining lungs. So I'm assuming that was a little bit of a guidance. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I spent as much time in altitude as I could and climbed hiked as much as I possibly could as well. And the biggest thing that I did that I think helped, 2 biggest things. One, physiologically, I would hike with roughly 40 kilograms or 50 kilograms of 100 pounds of rocks in my backpack.
Yeah.
Up a 14,000 foot peak, which is 18 miles. And I'm American. I know the measurements don't
just
make any
go in miles,
sense.
it's fine.
Yeah. But they don't like, this is an inch where that note, anyhow.
We'll translate however we want to. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So the biggest thing that I trained was right here. This is the most important muscle I trained was my mind.
What did you need to do that? Because this is the first time you did adventuring. We're going to talk about more adventuring, but this is the first of the great adventuring missions that you went on. So this is the first time you're training your mind for that. What did you need to do that?
The first thing I had to do was block out the people who weren't supporting me.
Yeah.
Which was 99.999% of the world.
So the same stats as you're surviving your second cancer was the people
Probably,
saying
yeah. Yeah, I had to block out the noise. And even today we have the noise comes in so many different forms and fashions and functions, and the biggest one is social media. And I remember I was not when I was training for Everest, but recently, which I'm sure we'll get to, running 7 marathons on 7 continents in just 7 days. I was having a bad day. I was flipping through social media, and I realized all of a sudden I was comparing myself at my worst to somebody else's best. I'm like, what am I doing? Yeah. So first, block out the noise. Get rid of it. And then focus on why I was doing it. A lot of people have goals and dreams, and everybody should. But if your goal is to buy a $2 million home, and a 50-foot yacht. Well, why?
Yeah.
What's the reason behind it? So for me, climbing Everest, I was literally putting my life in danger. My goal was obviously to make it to the top, but also make it back down. So climbing is a round trip sport.
Key.
And
I've never heard it put like that, but you're so right. It's a round trip sport. I think that should go on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to have a very deep purpose behind what I was doing. And when I did get over on the mountain, every step I took on the mountain, I actually had a flag that had names of people touched by cancer. It was a silk flag folded up in my chest pocket close to my heart as a constant reminder of why I was doing what I was doing. You know, it was always there. And it was to give people hope. It was to reach into the cancer world, to prove to others that cancer may not necessarily be the end. It could be an amazing beginning with the right perspective. You know, just like anything traumatic in your life. So I had that deeper purpose, and that's what kept me going step by step when we had hurricane force winds at Camp 2 and avalanches every day and temperatures from 40 to minus 40.
Yeah. Every variable. When you were doing that, when you actually made it to the summit, what does that feel like?
I can't say that was the first time anyone's ever asked me that question because it's so difficult to put into words.
I would imagine it would be. It's an experience bigger than the world.
Exactly. And if you can imagine every single emotion you have ever had and kind of explode it all at once, you know, fear, anxiety, happiness, joy, it was everything all at once.
Extraordinary. I just got a vision of actually, I don't know whether do you have the color runs in America where people run through parks and there's explosions of color that they run through?
Yes.
I just got a visual of that, but with emotions instead of colors. So I love that description. When you came back down to earth, literally, right, down the other side, completed the round trip, came back down, entered back into the world as such, because you are in a bubble as you're doing these adventures, entered back into the world as such. What is it that you took from that experience into your everyday life? What is it that you took from being a cancer survivor who made it up Mount Everest, doing it for such a big purpose, experienced this absolute, almost cataclysmic intersection, collision of emotions? When you came back down as you moved back into the real world, or whatever that is, but back into the world, what is it that you took with you from that experience?
When you accomplish something like climbing to the top of the world, summiting Mount Everest, you cannot come home the same person.
No.
You know, it changes you. It changes how you see not just the world, but also yourself and your own potential. So growing up in a small town has always humbled me. And going through what I've been through, the cancers, it's always been a humbling experience because I know the fragility of life. I know we could all disappear and we could pass away like that. Life is literally like that. Coming back down from Everest and going through these cancers, I still feel invincible. But I also know the back of my mind, I can hear myself as I'm getting older. You know, for example, when I was in Puerto Rico last, I was in the ocean, I was walking out, and there was, I don't know, maybe 3 meters out, there was some seaweed, you know, and it was beautiful white sand. And as I started approaching that, I looked down and my toes got about this close to the seaweed. And I thought to myself, there's something in there. Like, it's going to grab my toe. When I was a kid, run right through it. No worries. No, not at all. But coming down off of Everest, like I said, being up there, it's very difficult to put into words. But knowing that my life can impact, even if it's just one person, it's worth it. Because then that one person can impact another person who can impact another person, share your story. And I think it changed me in the sense that it's never about the summit, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
But looking at it as well, I have never made it to the summit of any significant peak by myself.
Oh, I love that.
I have always had, going through the cancers, I had the doctors, the nurses, my mom, my dad, the support system. Going up Everest, I had the Sherpas. I had my brother at base camp, who was literally my eyes and ears when I got up higher. And as we'll get to too. I've been up Kilimanjaro now 26 times. I lead a group up every
Yeah.
year, and it's a life-changing experience. We have double the success rate. I always use the same porters, the same local guides. To
Mm.
be successful, you have to have a team. And I think that's probably what going up this Everest and these other mountains has taught me. But I don't think we have enough time to go into all the lessons that I've learned.
Probably not. But I actually love that you came down feeling invincible and realized that it takes a team. So it wasn't invincible and rugged individualism. It was invincible and I need a team with me. I need connection. And I would love to have a second conversation around all of that because there's so much to unpack with that, especially, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Michael Unger's work from Canada. His work with that statement that you just said, like I could actually literally unpack that for an hour with you. But I love that. You touched on 26 expeditions up Mount Kilimanjaro, and actually the reason we're connected is because of your last expedition who you took up there, which is one of my great friends and clients from the US, and he had done the Great Race with you. So what I'd love to do is actually go to Kilimanjaro first because I watched you take Bill and his family, his children up there, and I saw the impact on somebody that I know. I don't know his children, but I do know him. And they did it very quickly. You guys had a conversation and was like, away, let's go. And I watched that impact, right? So I'd love to know, one, about Mount Kilimanjaro from your perspective, but also, two, what you see with these people when you take them year after year after year, and obviously different parties. But I watched that last year. And so I'd love to know from your side what it is that you see happen in people, the transformation you see happening in people, and why you've done Kilimanjaro 26 times.
Well, first of all, what you casually mentioned how, Bill and I did 7 marathons, and I was like, well,
we'll come back to that one. We're really going to unpack that one. I still think that one's crazy. So it has its own segment coming right up. Trust me.
Okay. So Kilimanjaro, the first time I did it, I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the culture. I fell in love with Africa. And granted, there are different countries throughout Africa. This is East Africa, just south of Kenya, in a country called Tanzania, or as some of us like to butcher it, Tanzania. But
Guilty.
And I was too until I visited and became friends with the locals. And it's interesting. One of the reasons I continue doing it is it's been a fundraiser for a cancer charity.
Mm-hmm.
And the business model behind that is actually really cool. They raise money for a cancer survivor to go for free, all costs covered. But then it's the responsibility of that survivor to raise funds for next year's survivor.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
It's like paying it forward on steroids.
Exactly. And they get to talk about their journeys. Anyone can go.
Yeah.
But it's that connection. And recently we've turned it into an immersive, almost like an immersive coaching experience, but as opposed to being an expedition, I call it an inspedition.
Okay.
It's an inward journey for an outward adventure.
God, I can feel that.
I can't tell you how many times people talk to me and they go on the trip and we're getting ready and they're like, oh, I can't wait to conquer this peak. I'm like, if it's you versus Mother Nature, you're not going to win that battle.
Yeah, hot tip.
Yeah, I hate to burst your bubble, but you're not going to win. It's you versus yourself, not you versus the mountain. So it's not an expedition, it's an inspedition. So we learn things about ourselves. And my favorite part, twofold. One, the day that they actually arrive, we step out of the hotel, if it's a clear day, and they look up at the mountain. And the mountain is still a long way away, but it's the highest freestanding mountain in the world. So there's nothing else around it. Giant volcano. And they're looking at it, and they see the glaciers on the summit, on the top of the mountain, and they think they're clouds. And I can see in their face what I call, pardon my French, and I don't know why we call it pardon my French, but anyhow.
No,
pardon
anyway.
my language. Yeah, they're like, that's their oh shit moment.
Yeah.
when they're like, oh my God. But then over the course of the next few days, 6 days to be exact, we get them to the top and they realize it's not about going from here to the top. It's about going from here to here to here to here to here and then getting to the top. So that transition, when they get to the summit, in an instant, their life changes. Every single person is in tears. I had the first active duty Marine from the United States Marine Corps at the summit, and he was in tears, and he tried to cover it up by saying, "It's such a long way down."
You can let it go up here, buddy.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
they're like
amazing.
things like that.
When did you first climb Kilimanjaro, and why did that happen? Was that you were the cancer person climbing it, or was that you actually wanted to go and conquer another peak and went up it?
That was part of what's called the Seven Summits, which is the highest mountain in every continent. That was number 2. I did Kilimanjaro,
Okay.
then Elbrus in Russia.
Amazing. So you've done the 7 summits.
Yes,
leads
ma'am. And I've
perfect-
also done the South
Leads
Pole and the
perfectly. South Pole and North Pole. I didn't realize that one. Wow. So North Pole, I know, but South Pole's not frequented, is it? North Pole,
It's,
I've come across people before, but South Pole's actually quite rare, isn't it?
I would say the opposite, because the South
Oh,
Pole, there's a
really?
research station there.
Yeah, true.
At the North Pole, it's constantly moving. So the weird thing about the two poles, which a lot of people might not understand or know, is when you get to the South Pole, you're actually standing on 2.5 kilometers of ice. It's that thick. And there's a continent, Antarctica. So there's land at the bottom of the world. The North Pole, however, is, if you can imagine the world being a giant glass of water and the ice cubes floating on top,
Yeah.
that's the North Pole.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's constantly shifting around because of the currents of water underneath. And there were numerous times, I remember one day we headed north. I was like, we headed up north. And we were going for, let me do the math here, 6.2 kilometers north. And while we were sleeping, we actually floated. No, I'm sorry, kilometers. So we went roughly 15 kilometers north. And when we set up camp, we went to sleep. The currents shifted and the ice started moving back. We floated 7 kilometers backwards. So we had to make up that distance in the morning before we even. Yeah.
That's extraordinary. Like that
Oh,
actually, you just blew my mind.
but it's so annoying.
Yeah, I know. It would be the most frustrating thing. I was going to say on the planet, literally on the planet. I didn't know that it actually moves. I mean, I think I remember something vaguely in high school studies about it moves, but actually understanding that conceptually and you actually float backwards, so to speak.
Yeah. It's
That's
unbelievable.
extraordinary. It kind of conjures up like those really bad movies from, you mentioned earlier, the 80s and the 90s, where like, people float away in the night kind of thing. It kind of brings that to mind. I love so much about this conversation. I wish we had time to pace it a little bit more. You mentioned 7 summits. You've done those, which is incredible. The thing that blows my mind and why we're connected is you did do the world's great race, which is 7 marathons, 7 countries, 7 days. And the person who we're connected through, Bill, I remember when he first told me he was going to do it, I went out and my team were Googling it because I said, this is what he's doing. And the team were giggling it and they were like, oh my goodness. And one of my guys in the team was actually like, I think I should get ready for this. I was like, okay, you're also mad. But it literally is one of the most insane propositions I've ever heard from an endurance perspective. Can you, for the audience that's not aware of it, can you unpack a little bit of exactly what this race is? And then I'd love to know a bit more about your experience with it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Great World Race is literally running a marathon on each continent in 7 days. So 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days. We'll call it our starting point. Not the first marathon, but the starting point was Cape Town, South Africa. We hopped on a plane and landed in Antarctica. The doors opened up. 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, we're running a marathon. And it's around the landing strip, which is a blue ice runway. We all finished, hopped back on the plane, took off back for Cape Town. So once we started that first marathon in Antarctica, the clock starts. And we have 7 days to finish. So when we landed in Cape Town, I want to say 2 a.m. or something like that. To be honest with you, it all turns into a blur. Yeah, so landing at 2 a.m. and then I think 4 or 5 hours later, we were running a marathon in Cape Town. Then after finishing that, we hopped on another plane and went to Perth, Australia. Hopped off the plane, got on a bus, ran a marathon there, hopped on the bus, went back to the airplane, took off, went to Istanbul, landed in Dubai to refuel, did both sides, European side and Asia side. And then this is where things get really hazy. We're running on adrenaline, and we stopped in
Yeah.
Madrid before going to Cartagena, Colombia. We refueled, got a new crew, refueled, landed, took off, not necessarily in that order, but while we were there, I don't remember it. No
Yep.
recollection.
Adrenaline haze.
Yeah, absolutely. And I apparently sent my wife a couple messages on WhatsApp, which I'm glad WhatsApp kept that.
And
But
then you
then
said good
landing,
things.
hopefully I did. I'm pretty sure I did. Never have anything bad to say about her. Landed in Colombia, did another marathon there. It was 110, 115 degrees in Fahrenheit. So what is that? 45, 50
45.
degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vomited 5 or 6 times, had heat stroke, ran, walked. And all I wanted to do was just make it to Miami for the seventh one. Landed in Miami, got an Uber from there to the hotel where my wife was waiting for me. Don't remember seeing her. Don't remember
Yeah.
getting to the hotel. Don't remember the Uber ride. But I have my receipt from Uber. I paid for it, so I got there somehow. Woke up that day, ran the last marathon, and that was it.
Yeah. So the thing that got me even before you all started from Cape Town was when I first discovered what it was that you run a marathon and your recovery is on a flight. It's not like 3 days recovery. It's an overnight recovery when you're actually flying. What possesses you to do this?
Great question. I love seeing what the human body is capable of accomplishing. And it's also amazing because yes, it is very physically demanding on your body. But if you put in the time and train, I honestly think you can do anything. And some of my long training runs were literally, and I had a trainer, he actually is an amazing trainer. His name's Adam. And if anybody's looking for a trainer, I'll hook you up with him. He's great. But some of the training runs he had me do weren't, like, say, 23 miles for my body. It was 23 miles for my mind.
Yeah.
So we worked on that. And the reason I did it again was to show people anything really is possible. Yeah, I mean, if a guy with, if a 2-time cancer surviving lunatic with one lung is going around the world doing these crazy things, what do you think you're capable of doing if you put your mind in the right place?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I love about that as well is you talked about the training of the mind and all that sort of stuff. There's an Australian football coach who's no longer with us, but he had this saying always that people think you rise to the heat of the occasion, but you don't. You sink to the level of your training. So one of the things that really strikes me with what you just said was you described this fog that you operated in for about half of that race, for about, like the adrenaline fog, not really remembering. So you actually literally were basically on autopilot from your training through that.
I would say so. And I would also say, falling down to the level of your training, absolutely. But I also think that you prepare for things before they happen.
Absolutely.
So it's not that I'm focused on bad things happening. Like on Everest, I wasn't focused on falling into a crevasse and trying to pull myself out. But if it did happen, I knew how to get out.
Yeah.
If I needed a new pair of shoes on the 777, the Great World Race, I had a backup. In fact, I had 6 backups. I was ready to go.
Yeah, one for each race.
Yeah. So,
yeah, and that's a really important point. My husband is Navy Commodore, so 1-star equivalent in the US. And he talks about all of the scenarios at sea and some things he had to deal with in engagement and sea trips was all about they had already scenario planned every single possibility of everything that happened. So some of the big things that did happen was just literally the team knowing their roles and what to do. So I really love that, being prepared as well. Sean, somewhere along the way, you've actually started speaking and turning that into something that, that's why you didn't know what airport you were in when you were in Dallas instead of Chicago. We were talking about some of the gigs that are coming in for you in the last few days and where you're going to be traveling for all of that. You do a lot of speaking. Where did that transition to speaking happen?
Interesting enough, it happened soon after climbing Everest. So Everest was in 2002 when I became the first cancer survivor to climb Everest. And it's just gone on from there.
One of the things that strikes me is 2 times cancer survivor, you summit one of the world's greatest peaks, you go on to the 7 peaks. But at that point, when you first went into speaking, it was obviously people were drawn and attracted to your story, and you've continued to do adventures, but it's now 23 years later. So I'd love to have a conversation. The first part of the question that I'd love to ask is, when you first went into speaking, what was the biggest thing that you had to learn about speaking when you were first taking to those stages in these early days? Not Sean who he is now, but Sean 23 years ago, version 1.
Version 1, I would say I have kept this going forward because we've heard the saying before, people will forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you make them feel.
Absolutely.
So the biggest thing that I did then that I'm still doing now is speaking from the heart and being authentic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What makes you have a powerful story. A lot of people have big stories and don't make it to stages well and not sustainably. Speaking from the heart and authentically will get you onto the stages, but you have kept stages, right? So what else has come into play with that? Because you've kept stages, you've kept demand. You just rattled off a whole heap of engagements that are coming your way at the moment. What has kept you on those stages? Because a lot of people with big stories don't stay on the stages. You've had incredible longevity already.
I would say it's not about you. So for me, it's not about me. It's bigger than me. It's about what I can do for others. And yes, I've always been good at motivating people. I've been, like I said, an athlete for years, and I can rally the troops. I can get the team going, and we can win some races. But honing a message over the past X number of years has been an integral component to speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And making myself available for learning more about what their pain points are and how my message can go in to support them. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with that. I also know where I can help, where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, but it's not about me. It's about what I can do for you and help you.
Absolutely. How would you say your message has evolved over time? It's still obviously very strongly around your identity as a cancer survivor and the adventurer, but how has it evolved over time to continue to be in service to people? Because the world in 2025 is much different to the world in 2002.
Very true, very true. And I would say within the stories, the message points have been adapted to what's needed. So going through COVID, now a lot of people are finally it's taken this long. A lot of people are finally getting together and having their meetings that they were supposed to have in 2019.
I know, it's crazy.
Yes. So one of the messages that I have is you can use that. You can use the setback as your superpower because you've had time to sit and think and make yourself stronger, better, more seen, more known, whatever it might be. You can change with the times. And I think within those messaging points, the story is the same. I overcame 2 cancers. There are different points along the line, but the messaging points and how it's delivered has definitely changed.
Do you think it's an incredible advantage for you that you are both a cancer survivor and an adventurer?
Great question. I would say yes, because I'm alive, and yes, because I love adventure.
Yeah.
In the speaking world, I would say so, because a lot of the lessons that I learned going through the cancers, I have used on the adventures.
Mm. And then I'm assuming that you take that into how you speak and the messages you learn so others can take those lessons away with them.
Absolutely. It's not just a fun, Hollywood story arc movie theme. This is what I did, yes.
Mm.
This isn't necessarily how you can do it too, but this is how you can accomplish amazing things. And it goes back to one core component, which is your own personal core values.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing with most of our audience is emerging and aspiring speakers, right? So people or people who want to break through to that next level. Your calendar is as full as you want it to be from a speaking perspective. The question I have for you is, what did it take for you to get there? Was it simply that you learned to hone your message and you were great on stage and it grew organically, or is there something you did to push that?
Interesting question. So recently, well, let me put it this way. I recently, and by recently I mean in the past 6 years, got married, and it's no longer me, it's we.
Mm-hmm.
So making decisions based on what's best for our future, not just my future. And instead of just winging it and having presentations come organically or word of mouth or through someone referring me, I now have a team helping me with outreach, with a CR, with all the stuff that I don't even understand. But apparently it works.
It does work.
But it goes back to, I've never summited any significant peak by myself.
Mm. How do you feel with your speaking career? And I mean that, like you just said, I can feel the achievement and the sense of self and the lessons and the mindsets and things like that through your adventuring and through your cancer journey. How does that translate into how you feel about your speaking career? Like, how would you describe how you feel about what you get to do every day with the speaking?
Interesting question. And my mind went into 18 different directions. One of them was looking at what I've accomplished with the cancers, with the adventure world, and knowing how fragile life is.
Mm-hmm.
I have a gremlin sitting on my shoulder, always chirping in my ear, and it's not things like you're not good enough or you're not smart enough. It's you will never be accomplished enough, because I know that I don't want to focus on being successful. I want to be focused on constantly succeeding.
That's a beautiful distinction. Can you unpack that for us?
Absolutely. And it goes back to appreciating what you have, not looking at what you don't. And I know it's an old adage, but it's enjoying the journey. And I should kind of jokingly tell myself, tell that to somebody who's stuck in a circle pattern trying to get down to Chicago O'Hare Airport when all they want to do is
especially in winter.
Right. Like, enjoy the journey. Oh, this is fantastic.
That's when the little punch emoji wants to come out to Sean.
Yeah, right. But I'm to the point now where I am working on being happy again with what I have. I will always want more, because I always want to continue pushing it more and more and more to help as much as I possibly can. Because there's so much negativity in the world. We all know it's there. In the States, you turn on the news, it's 99.999% negative. It's there. So I don't even watch the news. And we're not even going to talk about what's happening politically in the States. It's just it's a mess. It always has been, probably always will be. I know it's there. Why inundate myself with it?
Yeah,
move
100%.
on. So I'm to the point now where I want more speaking engagements. Absolutely. Am I happy with what I have? I'm very grateful for what I have. But that voice is, you can get more.
You can get more. You can do more. You can reach more people. You can do all the things. What is, with the shift to speaking, and now obviously with this focus out, we want more stages and things like that. What has been and I know this is a really hard question, but that's why I love asking it. What's been your favorite space or place to speak?
That's not a hard question at all, to be honest with you. I instantly know what it is. Yes, the pharma institutions, the conferences, the big expos, the big corporations, they're the ones that help pay the bills.
Absolutely.
But it's the smaller, more intimate settings that I like and that I enjoy.
Tell me more.
So, for example, I was giving a talk at a cancer fundraiser maybe 10 years ago. And I was struggling. I was thinking to myself, why the hell am I doing this? I was thinking about quitting. I was looking at finding something else to do. And after each presentation, I always hang out. I love meeting
Mm.
people. We had 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. I
Yeah.
think you can learn something from everybody on the planet. And while I was standing there waiting, I could see the next lady in the queue. She'd been in tears. Her mascara was running, and her eyes were bloodshot. And she came up to me and she latched onto me, buried her head in my chest and lost it. And I'm sitting here, and I'm about 6'2". I don't know what that is in meters. She's down here, and I'm this big, strong, courageous, tough mountaineer who's been through hell and back. And I'm supposed to be this tough guy. And she's buried her face in my chest. I'm holding it back. I'm trying to, suck back the tears, be strong for her. And she collected herself, leaned back, and looked at me and told me that in the past 6 months, she lost her husband to cancer. She lost her son to cancer. And she was diagnosed for the third time with breast cancer. And she told me that in her room, she had enough alcohol and sleeping pills and a suicide note. And she told me that she forced herself to go to one more presentation, and it happened to be mine. And she looked at me, she said, "Sean, you saved my life."
Yeah. And did that convince you should do this thing?
I'm still doing it. So those are the events that I really get a lot out of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What is it that you're like? I know that you had that moment. I think anyone who speaks and is in the public eye have those moments. Is this really worth it? Is this what I want to do? It can sometimes seem really hard. What are the moments is that the only moment where you've questioned this choice of career to become a speaker, to be on these stages? Like, what are the other things you have to deal with along the way?
It's interesting because if you look at where some people are and how they get the speaking, it's almost like they do something in their lives and they're like a firework. They explode, they're on the stage, and then they kind of fizzle away. I'm kind of like a slow burn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's constantly something's going off here, something going off there. But I've tried to never compare myself to someone else, only to who I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think that's helped a lot because it boggles my mind how so many people are more concerned about what others think of them than what they think of themselves.
I can tell you that 90% of the people that don't make it who should as emerging inspiring speakers, who feel that call on their life and feel that call in their heart that they should be speaking and impacting people, 90% of them that don't is comparisonitis, they're looking at their first rep to somebody's 500th rep. And so I love that perspective. Is there anything that you deliberately do as a practice to keep yourself out of comparing yourself?
I do. You see this phone right here?
Yeah.
I don't get on it. I don't. The first 15 minutes to 30 minutes every morning I wake up, I don't get on social media. That's me time. That's every morning I program my brain the way I want it to be focused on that day, to what I want it to be focused on that day, as opposed to having others program it for me. I'm the one in charge of the programming.
Yeah.
So I don't do it. And
Love that.
I can't remember the last time I was just scrolling mindlessly. And it happens to everybody. You get distracted. All of a sudden you sit down at work and you turn on the music to drown out the noise, and you're focused on writing or doing whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden you get 5 emails, your phone dings, and then next thing you know, you're scrolling mindlessly through social media and an hour's gone.
Yeah. Hello. At least once a day.
So I've learned that with certain certain cues, I can prime my mind to block everything out. One is to just put my phone, literally, when I'm focused, I do focused sprints. Like I'll go 25
Yeah.
minutes, take a 5-minute break, 25 minutes. I put my phone on airplane mode. Nothing comes in
Mm,
to break my concentration.
mm.
Earlier, I don't know if you heard the music in the background on my
I
microphone.
did.
I have some Santana playing in the background.
Oh,
You know,
great
that gets
choice.
me focused.
Great choice. One of the greatest guys I ever saw live.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You've also just done a TED Talk. Tell me about that, why you chose to do it, and also what has been, I guess, the other side of doing the TED Talk. Because a lot of people are kind of, I believe that you should do one later in your speaking career, which you've obviously done. You've waited a while to do it. I also believe that you should make sure that you do one that's really going to be in service to other people and not just because you're ticking a bucket list item. I have a lot of really firm beliefs around TED Talks, but I love yours. Tell me about how it came to be, how you actually chose what was going to go into it, and what it's been like on the other side of delivering it.
Absolutely. It came about because of a connection on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And he was putting together a conference in Prague, and he asked me if I had ever given a TED Talk. And I said, I have not. I've always wanted to. I've been approached numerous times, but because of my schedule, it just never worked out. He said, well, what if we get you here? And I was like, let's do it, because it worked perfectly. It was about 2 weeks before the 777.
Yeah.
And my longest run was supposed to be about 33 miles. And I thought to myself, what better way to go check out Prague? So I ran there over 30 miles in Prague. Like,
You
this
and
is
Bill are
great.
both insane. I can imagine him saying exactly the same thing to me. Okay, so you
I
ran Prague.
ran Prague a couple of times. But the whole process, again, I had someone help me with the script.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I'm a great writer. I gave her the ideas, and we formed this together with the stories and insights of what I wanted to convey. And I remember we were having a conversation, and she looked at me through the computer like this. She said, Sean, but that might, be, what was the exact word she said? Not everyone thinks that way, or some people might not agree. And I'm like, well, I want it to be a little controversial.
Yeah.
I want people to
It
think,
needs
because
to land.
yes, isn't that one of the points of giving a TED Talk, is to help people maybe see things differently.
Yeah.
Right? Present ideas and concepts from different perspectives to give people something to think about and maybe see things a little differently. So I gave the presentation, and then afterwards, I think I told you it was approved, but it's been flagged as being stigmatizing.
I did see that. Actually, I did coach someone a while ago who was a neuroscientist who has this incredible experience and this credible outcome that's all backed by neuroscience. And his has been flagged for bad science as a neuroscientist. And he's done an amazing job of actually using that to further the viewership of it. But it was probably one of the best TEDx talks I'd ever seen, and should be on the main TED.com site, in my opinion. And got flagged for bad science simply because he used personal experience to explain some of the concepts is there. So I'm really curious about getting it flagged for stigmatism. I'd love to know more about that and your response and feelings around that.
Well, my response is, they said, so, I looked up what TED's tagline is, and it's ideas can help, what is it? Ideas change everything. And I said, well, how about ideas can change everything? Most times, sometimes, maybe it all depends.
That says it perfectly. Yeah, I was quite surprised when I saw his flag because I loved the talk.
I have my thoughts on how the TED Talks were done and what's happening to them now. And I don't think they're at the platform they used to be honest.
No, I would agree with you. And I actually was quite ranty about 5 or 6 years ago about what was happening that was going to destroy the TED brand, because I felt a lot of things that have resulted in people like your talk, and Kaushik's talk all being red flagged, which is insane. And it's very much, it's not ideas to explore. It's got to be still what they were. You know, there's no, and if I think about Kaushik's work, which is neuroscience and neuroplasticity, there's no recognition of that and the movement forward and what we now know to be true about science and technology and the way the mind works. So I'm really all over that. For those that haven't listened to your TED Talk yet, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes, in a nutshell, what is it about?
In a nutshell, it's about how the words we choose to tell ourselves can create our outcome.
Yeah.
Basically, if I thought to myself going through the cancers, I was going to die, I wouldn't have made it. If I thought to myself going up Everest wasn't possible, I wouldn't have made it. And again, it's backed by science. We know how the words we choose to talk to ourselves, and we speak to ourselves more than anyone else throughout the day.
Absolutely.
Whether you think, and it was Henry Ford, who quoted, "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right."
Yeah.
And it goes back to the words again. The words we choose to tell ourselves can essentially predict our outcome. You're going to a party and you think to yourself, "Oh my God, this is going to be the worst party ever. I'm not going to have any fun." Well, guess what's going to happen?
It's going to be a drag and you're not going to enjoy it.
But the good thing is, if you flip the script, you can change your perspective on life.
Yeah. And I think this is why I was probably predisposed to loving your talk. Part of the backbone of this business for the last 8 years is being a belief in the power of the words, and the Hebrews got it right. So abracadabra, which is now a magic phrase, was originally a Hebrew phrase in ancient times, which meant I create what I speak. And so so from the very origins of our recorded intelligence, so to speak, the Hebrews had abracadabra in their language, but not to create magic tricks, but actually says I create what I speak. And that's what I think you epitomize, and that's why I was so excited to talk to you, because I think you actually epitomize that.
I had no idea that's what it meant. I love it.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And the more you say it out loud, the more you can feel the centuries and the generations of that being the truth of that expression, and it really comes through in everything that you've done. Having done that TED Talk and having wanted to always do a TED Talk, what is it that on this side of having delivered it, and it's now live on the platform, flagged or not, what is it that you feel about from an accomplishment and achievement perspective, and has it made a difference to your everyday life?
Difference in my everyday life? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No.
How does it feel from an achievement perspective?
Yeah, right. It's great. I can say I stood in the red circle. Yeah. But I was invited to give another one in Miami, I think in November. Yeah. And I'm open to topics because I want this one to be even more controversial.
Oh, I love that. See if you can get red flagged twice.
Exactly. But I just want to challenge. I want to challenge people's thoughts. I want to challenge that on a way, in a non-judgmental perspective, a non-judgmental way. But I want to challenge them to essentially see in themselves what others might see in them, and different ways of doing it or approaching it. So I need to come up with a new concept, a new subject to really push the limits this time.
Yeah, push the limits. Yeah. I want to ask a question. I ask this there's a question, and most of anyone who's a client of mine listening along is going to go, "Oh my God, she's going there," because I normally do this in my programs. Why does it matter to you that you challenge people's thoughts and how they think? Why does that matter to you? Not like what they get out of it, but why does it matter to you?
A couple of different reasons. One, I want to make the world a better place. And it might not be my way, and that's perfectly fine. But if I can empower someone who's smarter than me, who's better than me, to do something amazing, to have a ripple effect around the world, to create something, who knows? Maybe Einstein or Edison, the light bulb and E equals MC squared came from somebody who was just an influence in their lives.
Yeah.
And I may not be able to change the world, but I want to reach the people who can.
I love that. Why does making the world a better place matter?
I'm thinking of it. Is this a serious question?
I just come off the back of an evening with Sir Bob Geldof telling us his stories. And one of the things that I really took away from that was when he sees something that he wants to change, he goes and changes it at a very big level. You are driven. There seems to be this inherent drive in you to make sure the world is a better place. And you know that to do that, you've got to shift people in their minds and their hearts, right? The world is a little bit crazy at the moment. As we mentioned, we're not going to talk about what's creating the craziness. There's a lot of factors that are creating that craziness. So why in amongst all of this does it really matter to you to make the world a better place?
You know, because of that craziness.
Yeah.
And if you look at how much negativity is in the world, how much war, famine, starvation, disease, that's all negativity on different levels, obviously. And I want to fight that. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily, I take that back, not fight it, because the more you push against something, the more it's going to push back. So
yeah,
I want to help rise above it. Mm-hmm. And if I can help make the world a better place for someone else, mm-hmm. Then that's great. If I can impact a life to see things a little bit differently, amazing. Mm-hmm. If I can touch someone's heart and soul and mind and spirit and body to go on to live their dreams as opposed to doing something that someone else wanted them to do.
Yeah.
To think differently. I can only imagine a world where everybody thought the same and everybody believed the same. It would be a boring world to live in.
Totally.
I love having deep conversations. I love listening to people and picking their minds. And if I can rise above the noise for just a little bit and help somebody else get to the summit of their peak, then it's all worth it.
Is that why speaking is such a big part of what you do, because you can reach so many people?
I think so. That, and again, it goes back to just meeting more people and hearing their stories. I've heard so many stories that it's amazing, and so many people. You can learn something from every single person on the planet.
Absolutely. Sean, we're going to have to wrap it out very soon. What I would love to know is, you got invited into this world. You've built a career out of it from a speaking perspective. For those that are listening who, as I mentioned when we started, are mainly emerging aspiring speakers, what would be Sean's words of wisdom to them? What would you love to let them know about?
Speak your voice, speak your story, and speak from the heart.
Amazing. Sean, we opened this as you were talking, and I actually felt like we talk about, speaking, and we talk about adventuring, and we talk about cancer surviving. I think you're actually just a dealer in hope.
A hope dealer. It's better than a drug dealer. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but that's how it feels to me. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you. Thank you.